Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on data governance and how we're moving from manual to modern processes. In the webinar today, we're going to explore how new data governance technologies are making data management easier. This webcast will build on some of the themes that we presented recently in a short video, how automation is a game changer for data governance. In terms of the agenda for today's event, I'm going to start with a quick introduction to the presenters and then a quick introduction to Thorogood for those of you who don't know us. What we'll then go on and do is explore what data governance is and why it's important to us as organizations. We'll then start to introduce some of the tools that are helping us in this move from manual processes to more modern automated processes. And then we'll look at a more detailed demonstration of some of these tools. So first of all, introductions. So my name's James Leonard. I'm a principal data and analytics consultant with Thorogood Associates. I've spent a lot of time working with our enterprise customers, designing their data platforms and implementing data governance strategies and some of the corresponding tools that we'll look at in today's event. I'm also joined by my colleague Sushma Sakar, who is also a data and analytics consultant and has been involved in helping drive our data governance practice. So for those of you who don't know who Thorogood is an independent global professional services firm specializing in data engineering, data science, and data visualization. As an organization, we're intent on combining our business focus with best-in-class technologies to solve the world's most complex business problems. We offer a full range of services across the spectrum of data and analytics, including everything from initial strategies and roadmaps, requirements, design, implementation of solutions, and also the empowerment, including training and support. Specifically, today we'll be drawing on our experience putting together data governance strategies and solutions in place for our enterprise customers. So what I first of all wanted to start off by doing was talking about data governance and why data governance. In a modern world, and depending on who you talk to, data is one of the most important assets that any organization has. The art of data governance helps to ensure that data is usable, accessible, and protected. Data governance helps treat data as an asset to be utilized to identify things like trends, cost savings, behaviors, drive sustainability, and really a lot of different use cases, pretty much everything you do within an organization. And what data governance does is it leads to better data and analytics, which in turn leads to better decision making. It also helps to avoid data inconsistencies or errors in data, which can then in turn lead to integrity issues, poor decision making, and a variety of other organizational problems. A decision based on bad data is still a bad decision, and ultimately a bad decision that didn't need to be made. And just to draw some of this into focus, let us look at a couple of figures. So according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, 71% of countries have data protection and data privacy legislation. For example, the European Union has GDPR, Singapore has the Personal Data Protection Act, and they all have a common purpose. Each has its specific requirements and guidance that especially for global organizations, create different complexities. So we need to make sure that we're adhering to those in our data governance strategies. Moving on, 49% of respondents to a MicroStrategy survey identified data privacy and security concerns as a barrier to more effective use of data and analytics. So it's really important to help people in our organizations understand how they can make the best use of data to realize the value from it. And then just moving on to that right-hand side, so looking at some of the potential benefits. Gartner estimate that data and analytics leaders who share data externally generate 3 times more economic benefit from those who do not. So even though there is pretty significant real-world complexities when it comes to sharing data, there's a lot of value from getting that kind of thing right. So we need to understand ultimately how we manage the risk and compliance within our organization and have a governance strategy that allows us to tackle those risks associated with legislation, but also make the most of the business benefit that we can drive from data. Let's start having a look at how we can turn this into a reality. And when we think about governing data, there are some well-recognized approaches. And the Dharma DM box, or the Data Management Book of Knowledge, is really what I think of as the Bible for data management. And it's something that I've used when working with a number of organizations. And I think it's always a really good source to sense check your thinking. And what I'm going to do in this session is bring out some of the key themes that it discusses. In the Dharma DM box, a data management body of knowledge, It talks about data governance and sets out several key areas that really help contribute to data governance. So first of that, the strategy. Any organization needs to right-size their data governance. So it's important to think about what it is that you are going to do from a data governance perspective and what it is that you're not going to do. We also need to think about the different policies that we're going to put in place. Again, right-sizing that for our organizations. We need to think at the beginning about the standards and the quality. So one of the big things there, a decision based on bad data is a bad decision. How are we going to ensure the quality and the standards of the data assets that we're providing? We need to think about who's going to do it. So there are different structures that you can put in place for your data governance organization, but ultimately the stewardship of that data is going to be pretty key. Once we have the people, we have some of our standards in place, we need to think about the processes around it as well. So how do we make sure that we're compliant? How do we deal with different issues? What are the projects that we're going to run that help us manage our data assets? And ultimately, in terms of a slide I'll show in a second, or I showed at the beginning there, how do we actually value our data assets? And when we approach something like this in Thorogood, we typically look at 4 areas within an organization. So the people, the data, the tools, and the processes. Starting off with the people. Who are the people, and in what roles do we need them in to drive our data governance strategy? In the previous slide, we spoke about data stewards, but there's a whole framework of different people with different responsibilities that we need to have to make sure that we're moving to treating our data as an asset. We need to know what data to be looking at. We potentially won't tackle all data at once. So what is the key data that those people should be working on, at least to begin with, and then going forward to drive our businesses? Tools. So people, data, we need tools to support the work that they're doing. And ultimately, we have decisions to make in terms of what kind of catalogs, what kind of governance tools we want to have in place. And we'll look at those later on in this webcast. Finally, the process. I've already mentioned this on the previous slide, but what are the processes and controls that we need to have in place? And as I've just said there, really in this webcast, we're going to focus on how the tools are going to help us tackle our data governance challenges, but we're also going to look at it from a couple of different personas that we have identified that have a stake in data governance. So let me introduce those 3 personas that we're going to consider in this webcast. So first of all, the developers. These are the people who are predominantly creating our data and analytics solutions. They're creating the pipelines or data science solutions for our organizations. They want data governance to be as simple as possible. They want it to really be generated for them based on the work that they are doing when they're generating new solutions. So I want to be able to write some code, create a new data asset, and I want that to automatically really, as a developer, appear within my data governance tool. The developers also want to know what work has already been done so they can work with existing data, they can make their lives easier, and ultimately they can give value to the business much quicker. So if someone's already developed a data set, I need to be able to find it and reuse it. If I have questions about that, I need to be able to contact the right people. I know some nuances around the data, but I also know if the data that I'm working with has any of those special considerations. So it contains personally identifiable information, for example, and I need to consider the GDPR implications if I'm working within the European Union. The developers are going to work hand in hand with the data stewards at the start of the process. And if you remember, stewardship was one of the things that the Dharma DM Bock calls out. And the ultimate role of the data steward is to ensure that the data is managed as an asset and help the business realize the maximum value from it, while making sure that any risks associated with that data are well managed. That data steward, they're going to be in charge of managing the collection of data, making sure that it's classified appropriately, ensure it adheres to any of the policies that we have in place, and ultimately, those are the people who are going to be in charge of managing our entire data estate. The stewards, they're going to work very closely with the business users to enable the business to deliver insight on the data and ultimately sweat the data asset. They want the governance to be an enabler, not a blocker, something that they can use to find the data that they need and be assured of what it is they're looking at. And that ultimately that data can be used to make business critical decisions that are going to derive that value to the organization. I've kind of just said it there, but it will be all of their jobs working together to maintain an organization's entire data estate. And going back to my first point, making sure data is being used effectively to drive our businesses forward while making sure it is compliant and the risk is well managed. After all, we live in an ever-changing world, and the people, structures, and tools need to be quick to adapt to this, adding new data sets, modifying existing data, and creating new insights to respond to change. So those people have to work hand in hand with the tools, the processes, and the data that we have available. I just want to now take a quick look at the tools that will help us do this. So for the purposes of this session, we're going to look at two types of data catalog, operational and reference catalogs. So just to introduce those concepts, the operational catalog that we're going to look at in this session is the new Databricks Unity catalog, a tool designed to catalog data assets as they're built by our developers and capture that lineage. So as I'm creating a new data set, it's going to capture all of the metadata around it. It's going to tell me where the data's come from. I, as a developer, don't need to do anything. Ultimately, operational catalogs will also be used to secure our data. We can use them to apply fine-grained permissions as well. So it's not just cataloging it exists, but applying the permissions to it. Operational catalogs will often be used in conjunction with a reference catalog. So a reference catalog allows us to collate information from all of our different assets, typically independent of the technology. A reference catalog will provide an area that the data stewards that we've just spoken about can manage additional metadata to make it easier for the business to deliver value. An area where we can do things like define data classifications to ensure that we're managing the risk associated with our most sensitive data, but also an area that the business can search their organizational data assets to find the data that they need, again, to drive their businesses forward. And we'll really see in the demonstration how these tools help manage our complex data estates to ensure that the developers and stewards can focus on the tasks that add value. So in a recent web short video that I ran, how automation is a game changer for data governance, we introduced these kind of tasks in a little bit more detail. On the left-hand side, we have cataloging the estate. And this is typically table stakes. We have to be able to have this in place to start doing the activities on the right-hand side. And when we come to cataloging our estate, I've already said it, our developers and stewards want this to be as little effort as possible so that we can focus the time of the stewards and the business on managing the estate and realizing that kind of value add and answering and making decisions based on our data. In the demo, we'll see how Unity Catalog and Purview help those three profiles. First of all, do the thing on the left-hand side, so catalog the estate, but then how the business can use it to find the data that they need to make those critical decisions. I think that's enough from me. So at this point, I'll hand over to Sushma, who's going to take us through a demonstration.
Hi everyone, my name is Sushma and I'm going to show you how various tools that my colleague James talked about are going to aid different user personas within an organization for data governance. For the purpose of this demo, I have selected a data set that has information related to hotels across the world and their ratings. First, I'm going to assume the role of a developer who might be interested in preparing a data set and developing some notebooks and ETL pipelines for a business need using that data set. I'm now logged into a Databricks workspace, and in the persona switcher, I'm going to select SQL. I'm going to show you how Unity Catalog in Databricks can be helpful and how I can interact with and understand the data in the lakehouse in a secure way. So I'm going to click on Data on the left pane. We have different lakehouse assets in a workspace, tables, files, notebooks, ML models used for data engineering and data analytics. I can browse and view different data objects in the catalog using the Data Explorer that you see on the left side of my screen. So I know there's a data set called Popular Hotels, so I'd like to do some further development with that data set. So I'm going to search for it by leveraging Unity Catalog's built-in search capability. Unity Catalog also automatically leverages the governance model that's in place, so I will only see data that I have access to. So I've found this asset now. It is in the goal schema in the dev catalog. So catalog is the first level in a 3-level hierarchy to organize lakehouse assets. It has databases or schemas, which is the second level that contains tables and views, the third level. So let me click on this table now. So now that I've selected a specific table, I can view some additional details. So I can look at the table structure in the columns tab and add any comments if I have more knowledge about the data. So if I click on sample data, I can review the contents of the table and understand what the data looks like. Let me now switch to the details tab. I can see the storage location, who created the dataset, and when. So let me now switch to the lineage tab. So Unity Catalog also automatically captures runtime data lineage. So that allows me to see how data flows upstream or downstream. So lineage graph displays the data flow graphically, and I can see that the gold popular hotels table is populated from the silver table. I can also see column level lineage. So if I click on city country column, I can see that it's derived from two columns in the silver table, city and country. So this also helps with troubleshooting and can understand if we're following compliance practices. So let me now close this graph and switch to the Insights tab. So I can see who is using the dataset the most in the Insights tab and how. So I see that frequent users are my colleagues Al and Max. I can also see the frequent queries that are run on this table. So if I pop this out in the SQL editor that will open, I can see how much time this query is taking to run. So as a developer, I can understand if I need to do any optimization or partitioning for better query performance. So what's important to understand is that none of this is manual anymore. Previously, all the metadata needed to be maintained manually in an Excel, and now all of this is simpler because Unity Catalog is offering these out-of-the-box features to help with data governance. So now that we've seen how a developer can leverage tools such as Unity Catalog for data governance activities, let us move on to look at how a data steward can find benefits from the tools that we've discussed. So as a data steward, my aim is to ensure the health of data assets and the metadata and identify if there are any data assets without classification. I'm going to use Microsoft Purview for this purpose. So I'm now in the tool and I have Microsoft Purview Governance portal open. What I'm going to do first is introduce a few features of the tool itself and how it works, and then move on to demonstrate how I can gain value out of the tool as a data steward. So on the left, you see different icons. So let me click on Data Map. So Data Map is where I register all my sources, not just Azure-based such as Azure Data Lake Storage, but also sources such as Power BI and Amazon S3. I can also run scans to capture the metadata of the data present in these sources. So I see something called as classifications under annotation management. Let me click on that. So classification helps me associate logical tags to different assets and their attributes. So I can search for what I want and understand the data better. So there are system classifications and custom classifications. And I have added a manual one called Hotel Review Score to classify my assets. And I've linked this to few of my datasets that contain columns that are scores. So I have also added some managed attributes and linked them to my assets so the users can use them to search for assets. So I've added cost center, I've added hotel region and hotel country. These are some of the managed attributes I've added. So let me now switch to data catalog. So catalog is where I would browse for assets. So let me click on browse, and so I can see how my managed attributes are helping me filter and search for assets here. So I can see in the filter drop down, cost center, hotel region and hotel country that I added as managed attributes before. So I have also added a term in the business glossary. So this explains what my classification means. And if there are users who need more clarification, they can always refer to this. So let me now switch to data estate insights. So this is where I can check the health of my assets. So let me now filter for my collection. I'm selecting hotels. So I see that 40% of my assets are not classified. So let me now click on this. So I see most of them are folders. So classification may not really be applicable, but I do see there's a Parquet file, madrid.parquet, which is not classified. So I can now go in to add some classifications if I know what to do. Or if I need more information, I can check who the experts and owners of this asset are and reach out to them to get more information. Ultimately, we'd want to make the most of our data, as James mentioned, and we'd want as much as our data classified as possible. And these dashboards will help us identify where we need to spend more time to meet our data governance goals easier. So as a data steward, I've managed to ensure that the health of the data is good using Microsoft Purview, and data is trustworthy and is available to be consumed by business users to derive insights. Next, I'm going to take on the role of a business user who wants to understand more about the hotels. So let me browse for all the assets that are available to me in the organization. So as a business user, I'm looking to understand more details about the hotels. For example, I can search for hotels where region is America. So let me search for hotel region contains. So now that I've done this, this lists all the hotels that are in the America region. And this is very easy for me now because the data steward has put in the time and effort to add managed attributes that help me. So next, I'd want to understand what some of the popular hotels are. And let me clear all the filters. I saw a data set called popularhotels.parquet. Let me click on that. So when I click on schema, I see that there is a breakdown of different scores. So I don't understand at the first go what this means. So I see that there is a glossary term associated with this. So let me click on this. So I understand now that this is a numeric score out of 5 based on online reviews collected across different metrics. So I can also view other assets that are linked to this glossary term. I wouldn't have been able to understand what it means if the data steward hadn't filled it in. So let me go back to this asset. So I can also see that it is certified thanks to the steward. And so I'm now more confident about the asset. I can also see that some attributes have been added by the steward, so help me understand this better. For example, I now know what cost center this belongs to. If I click on lineage, I know where this data is coming from. This is from different cities and countries across the globe. In Unity Catalog, we only saw the lineage of how data flows in Databricks. So we saw gold is populated from the silver table. Over here, we can see an end-to-end lineage and how data flows from bronze to gold in ADLS and what ADF pipelines, for example, we use. That way, it's different from the lineage that we saw earlier on Unity Catalog. So I don't know if I have all the countries captured here. So let me check who the owners of this data set are. So I can ask them. So I can probably send an email to Max or Al to be able to see if there's something that's missing. And once they respond, I can request for access. But now I can trust the data that I want to use because the data steward has marked it as certified. So next, I want to see what some of the top performing hotels are so I can maybe give some bonuses to my employees in those regions. Let me go back to the data catalog. So I want to see what reports are built on the data available in my container Purview marketing event. So if I click on lineage, I'm able to see that there are some Power BI reports that have been built on the files in the Purview marketing event container. So let me click on this report. So this opens up the Power BI report that's been developed. So I see that there are scores between 4 and 5 here. And I know this is good because I saw on the business glossary earlier that these scores are the scale for this is 1 to 5. And I see that London and Dubai are best performing. So I can maybe decide to give the employees in those regions some bonuses. And I can also dig deeper and understand what is working well for these hotels. It's great that the stewards have done this work to ensure I have good quality data that's available for me to use and make business decisions. All right. That brings us to the end of this demo, and I hope you now have a better understanding of how different tools we discussed for data governance help different user personas within an organization. Essentially, the idea is that different user personas spend more time on activities that add value, basically the right side of the slide that James was showing, and less time manually cataloging or identifying what's missing by leveraging these tools because they have mechanisms that perform those activities in an automated fashion. James, I'll now hand it back to you to wrap up today's webcast.
So as Sushma just said there at the end, really, and I thought the thing that I would bring you back to is this Dharma governance kind of overview. But hopefully that demonstration showed how modern data governance tools are moving us from those manual data governance processes, manually collecting our data assets, to more automation. And in the process, helping those different personas that we talked about earlier and saw in the demo, accelerate their data governance journeys by, again, taking out the cumbersome and manual nature of some of the activities that we need to perform to understand our data estate. But in fact, it now lets us spend more time on that value add so that ultimately we can start to treat data as an asset and drive our businesses forward with it. In terms of the next steps, we would be delighted to work with you to review your current approach to data governance, explore how some of these tools that we demonstrated today can help you on your journey, and really independent of the cloud that you're working with. Beyond that, if you do have anything related to data engineering, data visualization, or data science projects you wish to discuss, then please don't hesitate to reach out. So with that, I will conclude today's webcast. Thank you very much for joining us today, and hopefully you enjoyed the session.